We're going to be over in 1 Samuel. We're going to look at several things. But the first thing I want to ask you is, does the name Randy Newman mean anything to anybody? Does this person mean anything to anybody? Anybody? You know who he is? Okay, you know who he is? You know who he is? Well, okay, what about this next picture? Does that strike a chord with anybody? Randy Newman is the author of You've Got a Friend in Me, if you didn't know that. You've got a friend in me. And today, as we are talking about a moment or several moments in the life of David, this kid who became a king, we're going to talk about friendship. And we're going to look in 1 Samuel 18 and 19 and 20 and 23. I promise to let you out in time for Mother's Day supper. It's no problem. I have no problem with that at all. We'll get out here in time for your 6 o'clock reservations. So it'll be fine. But I want to talk a little bit today about friendship. I want to talk about what it means to be a friend, because Jonathan, the crown prince of Israel, came upon a young man whose name was David, and they struck up a friendship that is a friendship for all time. It is the friendship that so many people look back to. It's the friendship that so many people want to talk about, and they want to look into what did they have together. What kind of friendship did they have together? Well, they honored each other. They were loyal to each other. They were trusted with each other. They encouraged one another. And today, I want to look at 4 snapshots of this friendship. And today, we're looking at how Jonathan was a friend to David. And while we may not have a lot of biblical record how David was specifically a friend to Jonathan, the reality is this: you don't get the kind of friend that Jonathan was to David if David's not also a friend to Jonathan. And so I want to look at 4 different snapshots of this friendship today. The first one we're going to find in chapter 18 of 1 Samuel. And it says this: when David had finished speaking with Saul, Jonathan was bound to David in close friendship and loved him as much as he loved himself. And Saul kept David with him from that day on and didn't let him return to his father's house. If you don't recall the context here, this is just after the Goliath story. This is just after his encounter with Goliath. So you've got David, the kid who would become a king. He's anointed several chapters ago. We see him as a musician in the court of Saul. We see him as a warrior in front of Goliath. And today we're going to look at the friendship that we see here with Jonathan and David. And the first aspect of this is a sense of honor. You find this in verse 3 and 4. Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as much as himself. Then Jonathan removed the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his military tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. Now, if you don't understand what that means, that just, okay, whatever, you're just handing off your armor to somebody else. There is significance here. There's a level of honor that is being shown to David. A military individual doesn't just give up all his regalia to somebody else. It is something that he does with a sense of honor in front of David. First of all, I think that Jonathan recognized who David was going to be. And he saw in him this right to be the king, his worth to be a king. And so we see here Jonathan honoring David. You know, he's given, this has just happened with Goliath. This is the aftermath. And he's giving him his sword. I mean, if anybody's into fantasy movies, fantasy writing, especially in that range of writing that's Tolkien and some other things, giving up a sword, that's a big deal. I mean, this is the time frame. Now, maybe they didn't, but in this genre of understanding, that you would name the swords. They had meaning behind them. And Jonathan's sword, the son of the reigning king, a valiant warrior in his own right, is giving him his sword. He's giving him his bow. He's giving him his military uniform, in essence, with his military tunic. He's handing him these things in a way to say, I recognize your value. I recognize your worth. I recognize your future. And I want to honor you with these things. Can you imagine what would happen if we began sharing with other people how we see them as worthy, as we see them as valuable? We live in a throwaway moment in society. We live in a moment where everybody's mad at something. And we live in a time that specifically with a lot of places in social media where the attacks on others is just unbelievable. How many people, they just attack people. Nobody can do anything right at any time. Nobody can think the right thing at any time because we live in such a moment where everybody and everything is somebody's going to be against it. Somebody's going to be negative about it. And there used to be a time, and I'm not saying we need to try to go back because we can't. There was a time where there was a sense of respect among people that you may think it, but you don't always say it. We don't live in that time. If people think it, they say it. And if they think it, they also type it. And it goes out into the universe with that stuff. The lack of honor that we are seeing in people today is not what we should be seeing from God's people today. We need to be having a sense of honor amongst ourselves to start with. Our own convention can't seem to get this right. There is so much going on in Twitterverse about the Southern Baptist Convention right now, and sadly, it's more internal than external. We have got to start getting this right. And you say, well, I'm not even on Twitter. That's fine. But here's the thing. We also have to get it right as a church family, that we have to come together and make sure that we're honoring one another so that when the world sees something different, they might stand up and go, why are you honoring? Well, that's weird. That's what we do. Because God honored me with Jesus, I'm going to honor you. Because He saw worth in me, I'm going to see worth in you. Because He saw value in me, I'm going to see value in you. This is incredibly important for friendship. If you're going to be a good friend to somebody, it begins here. It begins with this sense of honor. Are you honoring the friends that you have? Or are you keeping them at arm's length? Are you just giving them enough to keep them? Are you honoring them, or are you just using them to get what you want in life? That's not friendship. That's abuse. We live in abuse when we need to be living in honor. And we need to be giving honor to our friends, to our family. We need to honor them. Today, this Mother's Day is a sense of honoring mom, okay? But as you've seen, you probably read this before or heard this before, why do we only honor mom one day a year? Does she only do things one day a year? Is she only a mom one day a year? No. She's a mom all the time. She's a mom when you don't want her to be your mom. Okay? She's going to mom you. That's just what they do. And dads are going to dad you next month, okay? That's just the way it works. But the reality is we need to be honoring our family, our friends. We need to be honoring our church family on a regular basis. That needs to be the norm, not the occasional. To look at one another, to look at your friends or your family or your church family, and to look at one another and immediately see value. Not value to how they can serve you, but value because they are a human being created by a holy God for a special purpose on this planet. You have value. You have worth. And we need to be thinking about that and analyzing that and considering that and showing that. This is what Jonathan does. He's showing honor. He recognizes that, he's the crown prince. He's next in line. But Jonathan already recognizes who's really going to take over. And he doesn't get mad about that. He doesn't strike up a friendship so that he can betray him later to take the throne. He doesn't strike up a friendship so that he can be close to David, so when David takes over, then Jonathan, can have a way up and in. That's not the point. I don't see that in Jonathan and David's relationship. I don't see that as a part of what Jonathan is just being a good friend. And you know what? I think we all could use good friends sometimes. We all need a good friend sometimes. The other side of that is this. Are you being a good friend to them? How are you showing honor to them? How are you expressing to them their worth and their value in just who they are as a person? It's important that we do that. The second snapshot that I want to look at is over in chapter 19. It's the first few verses of that chapter. And we're going to look at this sense of loyalty. Now, Saul ordered his son Jonathan and all his servants to kill David. You see this? Saul ordered his son Jonathan and all the servants to kill David. Immediately, Jonathan's got a choice to make, doesn't he? Who am I going to be loyal to? Am I going to be loyal to Saul, or am I going to be loyal to this friendship? Jonathan, I think, so smart individual and recognizes what's about to happen. He's recognizing that his own dad is making a rash statement that has no bearing. Why in the world and Jonathan goes to his dad on occasion and goes, what has he done? Tell me 3 things the man's done. Tell me one thing the man's done. He has served you. He's fought for you. He has helped you. He's provided musical therapy for you. And he's done all these things. What has he done other than be an outstanding individual? What's he done? He has been loyal to you. He's done whatever you've asked him to do. What's he done? And Saul always... And he's, Saul in the abuser role, oh, yeah, you're right. And you're right, I apologize, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes right back into, somebody's got to kill David. But Jonathan has to make a decision. And he's making a decision to be loyal to his friend. Because Saul is creating this problem. But Saul's son Jonathan liked David very much, so he told him, my father Saul intends to kill you. Be on your guard in the morning and hide in a secret place and stay there. I'll go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are and talk to him about you. When I see what he says, I'll tell you. And Jonathan spoke well of David to his father, and he said, the king should not sin against his servant David. He hasn't sinned against you. In fact, his actions have been a great advantage to you. He took his life in his hands when he struck down the Philistine, and the Lord brought a great victory for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. So why would you sin against innocent blood by killing David for no reason? So Saul listened to Jonathan's advice and swore an oath. He would break it, but he swore an oath. As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be killed. Well, David wasn't killed, but it wasn't for lack of trying on Saul's part. So Jonathan summoned David and told him all these words, and Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he served him as he did before. Now, this is prior to some other things that are going to go on. But Jonathan remained true to his friendship with David. In light of this rash edict from the king, his dad, Jonathan's like, this is wrong. He recognized how wrong this edict, well, this is wrong. He shouldn't be saying, this proclamation is in bad taste. It's just wrong. So he goes and tells it. He remains true and he remains loyal. In the face of pressure, Jonathan remains loyal in his friendship. Jonathan then risks his life. Now see, this is something else that we don't understand because we're all about speaking truth to power in our moment today. That wasn't the moment then. It may be a moment today. That we all feel free to just speak disrespectfully to anybody and whoever we want to. It doesn't matter their position. But in this time frame, Jonathan was really taking a risk because Saul could have turned on him. Saul could have said, I'm not going to hear this. You're done. You're out of here. He really risked in this moment. But his friendship and his loyalty in that friendship was valuable to him. And it's valuable to us. If we're going to be a good friend, not only should we show honor to one another, if we're going to be a good friend, there's got to be a sense of loyalty in this friendship. You know, it takes but one decision to break trust. And it takes a long time to build it. And that's an unfortunate reality. But for you to learn to trust somebody takes a long time. They do one thing and it's all over. This is why it's incredibly important that loyalty be a marker for you in your friendships, because this is what the Bible is showing us to do in our friendships. We must be loyal to each other. Loyal to our friends, loyal to our family, loyal to our church family. And have that as an understanding that we're going to remain true to one another, and we're going to have this sense of loyalty. We're going to see in a moment that God did this for us. This is why we can see the model, not in just Jonathan and David, but we see it over in the New Testament too. But this sense of loyalty is very important, and we live in a time where loyalty is not always on the highest of our characteristics, but loyalty needs to be. We need to raise loyalty up several notches and realize that the 4 snapshots we're looking at today show us how to be the friend or the family member that we need to be. Why? Because it's what we see modeled in Scripture and honored in Scripture. This Jonathan and David story takes up several chapters in the book of 1 Samuel. Why? Because it's showing us an incredibly important internal perspective of friendship. And if we are not going to be honoring one another, we're not being a good friend. And if we're only going to be loyal until it hurts me a little bit, or I have to risk something, then I'm not really being loyal. And it comes back to that sense of use and abuse again. If I'm only loyal to you as long as you serve me, that's not true loyalty. Loyalty is tested under the pressures and the risks of losing that friendship. And the choice to say, I want to keep this friendship even though it may risk me in other areas of my life, because this friendship is of God. And this friendship, I want to be a Christian friend. And to be a Christian friend means that I have to be loyal to you. Well, but what if they hurt you? If you can go through life and never be hurt, praise God, but it's not going to help. It's not going to happen to any of us. We're all hurt. We all get hurt. We all face issues and face problems. And I would suggest to you that the strongest friendships are the ones who weather these storms and communicate with one another so that we can continue to walk the pathway of friendship. Jonathan goes and communicates to David, and he's loyal to him. He goes, look, Dad's going to kill you. That's his whole intent. But I'm going to try to talk him out of it. And David's like, well, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. I'd really like for you to try to talk him out of that. That would be awesome for you if you would do that. But this is just a loyalty that Jonathan is showing. And up into 1 Samuel 18, we don't really see anything that David did to warrant this kind of friendship, other than Jonathan saw a heart in David that was a lot like his. He saw this kindred spirit and said, I want to be a friend to an individual like that, because we can be friends together, and I can see in you the same things that I want to give, and that creates this moment of friendship that walks through the storms of life. To have your friend come and say, hey, my cousin is on his way to kill you, but I'm going to try to talk him out of that. You see, that friend could side with family over you He could side with him and say, I'm just going to step out. Y'all are on your own. I don't want to have anything to do with this. I'm not a part of this. I'm not in this struggle. No, that's not what Jonathan did, and that's not what a good friend will do. A good friend will step up and step into the moment and to protect. Are we that kind of friend? Are we that kind of family member? Or do we just throw it all up and run away at the first sign of problem? You don't know how strong a boat is as long as it stays in the harbor. You only know the strength of that boat when it has weathered a storm and returned to the harbor. That's when you know how strong that boat is. You don't know how strong a friendship is until it's weathered a storm or two. And that's when you know what kind of friend you have and what kind of friend you are. Honor and loyalty. The third one, we're going to look over in chapter 20 at a couple of verses in chapter 20. And here we see this sense of trust and being trustworthy. I'm going to highlight a couple of verses for you. The whole chapter 20 revolves around this. I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. Verse 4, Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." So David gives him this plan about the new moon festival, and he's supposed to go eat, but he's going to miss it. And down in verse 8, David is saying, deal kindly with me. If I've done anything wrong, kill me yourself. Why even take me to your father if I'm in the wrong? And Jonathan in verse 9, no. If I ever find out my father has evil intentions against you, wouldn't I tell you about it? You can trust me. Now, that sounds like a bad car commercial, doesn't it? You've heard that. I've heard that one before. Oh, you can trust me. And 9 times out of 10, to maybe 99 out of 100, you can't trust a person that sits there and says, you can trust me. It's the way of life these days. The level of trustworthiness that we find, it's just so low today. Who can I trust? Who can we trust? It's such a difficult question. But the reality is, in Christian friendship, you should be able to trust that friend, and that friend should be able to trust you. That is a level of friendship that honors God and is living by the Spirit of God, that you can be trusted with each other. And so you need to ask yourself, how trustworthy am I being to that person? Am I walking and talking and living and breathing in such a way that causes them to be able to trust me? Am I doing things that create trust or break trust? Most of us in this room have all lived through middle school or high school, and we know all the damage that can be done with betrayals and lack of trust and mistrust and not trusting. It's a minefield walking through middle school and high school these days. It is literally a minefield. You don't know what you're going to say when that's going to set off that bomb that's sitting in front of you. That person that you trusted is now, wait, what happened? What's going on? I thought we were friends. Well, we used to be friends, but, Susan told Julie, and Julie told Bobby, and Bobby told his cousin Eddie, and Eddie told me that so-and-so and such you did. Now, if we could only Matthew 18 this thing a little bit in, middle school and high school, we'd probably settle a whole lot of stress down. Go to the person. Don't listen to people who want to talk about a person. Walk them to the person and say, you two got something to talk about. That's showing a sense, you can trust me. You can trust me. Are you trustworthy? Is that what you are in your friendships? Are you the trusted individual in your family? Can you be trusted in the church family? Are you trustworthy? This is an important question that we have to ask ourselves. Jonathan, again, goes to such length and such risk. And Saul gets mad. He says he's got to die. In verse 32, Jonathan says, why is he to be killed? What's he done? And again, now Saul's throwing spears at Jonathan to kill him and having all kinds of issues. And so Jonathan finally goes out. This is where they had the arrow story. This is where David's hiding and Jonathan's shooting arrows, and they already had a predetermined plan. If I shoot the arrows in front of you, you get to come home. If I shoot the arrows beyond you, you got to go because my dad is just going to kill you. And so he shoots the arrows past David. He sends the boy out, pick up the arrows. He sends him home. David and Jonathan are together, and they are having, and so David knew he could trust Jonathan. Can you be trusted? Can you be trusted with the little things? Can you be trusted with the heavyweight things? Can you be trusted? See, some friends we have, they can be trusted with the dailies. They can be trusted with the little things. But there's not a whole lot of friends in our life that can handle the heavy things. But we all need a friend that can handle the heavy things. And going back to a statement I said at the beginning, we don't see a lot of David to Jonathan. We see a lot of Jonathan to David. But the reality simply is this: you don't get Jonathan if David hasn't been a friend too. Can you handle the heavy? Can you handle the weight of information? Can you handle the confidentiality of information? Because trust in that regard is easily broken. You only have to talk once, and that person's likely done with you. You may go back to the dailies, and you get the highs and the hellos, and had a great weekend. But you don't get the intimate conversations that we need in life if we haven't learned to be trustworthy with them. And when we are not being trustworthy and we don't have that confidant in our life that is also trustworthy, what happens is we start to self-medicate and have self-therapy going on, and that's never a positive moment. We need to have somebody that we can trust, that we can talk to. Are you that person, and do you have that person? These are incredibly important things for you to consider. Am I trustworthy? Honor, loyalty, trustworthy. The third snapshot is over in chapter 23, and this is a snapshot of encouragement down in verse 15. Now, to catch you up, David has escaped. He's come through the cave of Adullam where he had to be encouraged by God, and some others came in, and he's on the run basically. Saul is after him. He's on the run. And so as you get here in verse 15 of chapter 23, David was in the wilderness of Ziph and Horesh when he saw that Saul had come out to take his life. Then Saul's son Jonathan came to David in Horesh and encouraged him in his faith in God, saying, "Don't be afraid, for my father Saul will never lay a hand on you. You yourself will be king over Israel, and I'll be your second in command. Even my father Saul knows it's true." We view David as this great man of faith, right? But in all of us, running concurrently with faith is the opportunity to be filled with fear. And whenever you want to strengthen your faith, the enemy is going to provide you opportunities for the same greatness of fear. I want to have more faith, but it seems like the moments that I want to say, I want to be more faithful to God, that week, if not that day that you say it, you have a great opportunity to be filled with fear. And too often, we don't have that friend that will encourage us. Why? Because we haven't got one that can come and say, "I'm going to encourage you in your faith today. You don't have to be afraid." Yeah, but you don't know. Jonathan comes to David, "No, my father's not going to lay a hand on you." Now, walk that out a little bit and figure out, what do you think Jonathan means? Here's what I think Jonathan means. I will let my dad kill me before I'll let him kill you. Think about that. Think about the encouragement of a person that would come to you and say, I'll step in front of whatever bullet's coming your way. That's a friend. That's somebody who gives encouragement. That's somebody who's saying, look, I know you're afraid. I know that you're dealing with this, and maybe you've gone through that and can walk them out of it. Or maybe you just want to sympathize with them and say, you know what, I have no idea, but I can sense you're afraid. And I want to encourage you in our friendship, and I want to encourage you in your faith, your friendship with God. I want to encourage you. That's a friend. That's a friend who will say, I'll step in the way of the bullet. I'll step in front of the storm. I will make sure that it hits me before it hits you. I'll make sure that I'll give you all the steps you need, and you just walk behind me. I want to encourage you today that God has put me in your pathway to encourage you, to increase your faith, because fear can be so paralyzing. Are you an encouraging kind of friend? Jonathan was that kind of friend to David. He showed him honor and loyalty and trustworthiness and encouragement. These are the same qualities that we see in our greatest example, Jesus Christ, as He did the same thing for you and for me. He honored us with His incarnation. He left heaven, the perfect place, and came here. He let go of His glory to be a human. And He did not think that He shouldn't, because He saw value in you. So He honored you by leaving heaven and coming to earth. He was loyal to death. He died when we deserved it. He did it for us. Did it for you all the way into the future. He did it for you. He was loyal. He was trustworthy. He is trustworthy. In all that He did, He said, I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I will be with you always to the ends of the earth. And even when He told His disciples, physically, I have to go. But look, guys, I want to encourage you. Yes, I know it's going to be fearful and I have to go, but I'm sending somebody in my place that is going to be much better for you in the long run. You need Him. You need the Spirit. You need the presence of the Spirit of God. And so I'm sending Him to you. Here, Jesus, a friend of sinners, honored you, loyal, trustworthy, encouragement. What a great friend that He is to us. If you don't know Him by faith, today is a great day to decide that, to know that, to understand that. But for many of us that have already received Jesus, we need to be asking ourselves, what kind of friend am I being? Not only do you have Jonathan to look at in how he was a friend to David, but you have Jesus and how He has been a friend to you. Both of which you can look and ask yourself, what kind of friend am I being today? Am I honorable? Am I loyal? Am I trustworthy? Am I encouraging? Can you say yes to all four questions? If not, I encourage you to take a moment while we are going to stand and sing in just a second. I encourage you to take a moment and ask the Lord to help you Maybe you already have identified a friendship that's in a struggle moment. You've identified a friendship that either that person is being difficult to you, or you are being difficult to that person because there's not honor, loyalty, trustworthiness, or encouragement going on. And you say no to one of those questions. And if you say, well, I don't know for sure, that's probably a no somewhere along the way. We just like to say, I don't know, because we think it exonerates us. Ignorance does not exonerate you from the reality. If you are not being a good friend, take the biblical model and pray to the Lord God in these moments to help you be the friend that He's created you to be, the friend that He's been to you, so that you can show Jesus to the world around you.